I think then it gets really confusing for the general public and even the industries that I just mentioned. Like, what actually is it? The more people that sort of call things strength and conditioning, the more sort of methods that get thrown into it, which then just makes it murkier. And then the poor person that, the parent and young athlete that's trying to figure out, am I doing the right strength? Well, I do strength and conditioning with this person. Does that mean I'm doing it right? Is it ticked off, or do I need to do strength and conditioning with this person? And how's that different? And just, muddies the waters. And it's just off the back of a few discussions we've been having with different people. It's just getting very confusing.
So welcome to the Athlete's Edge podcast. We've worked with 49 pro athletes and 36 semi-pro athletes. Today we're diving into a topic I wish more people understood properly: athletic development, what it actually means, what it doesn't mean, and why getting it wrong can set athletes back years or worse, and careers before they start. So I guess before we start, what had you fired up this week when we talk about strength and conditioning?
I guess just how we define the term. I guess now we're sort of hearing strength and conditioning getting thrown around a lot, from obviously our industry to school programs now to even footy programs. So we do strength and conditioning at training, to physios and osteos and all the health practitioners, which, not to say they're not, but I think then it gets really confusing for the general public and even the industries that I just mentioned. Like, what actually is it? The more people that sort of call things strength and conditioning, the more sort of methods that get thrown into it, which then just makes it murkier. And then the poor person that, the parent and young athlete that's trying to figure out, am I doing the right strength? Well, I do strength and conditioning with this person. Does that mean I'm doing it right? Is it ticked off, or do I need to do strength and conditioning with this person? And how's that different? And just, muddies the waters. And it's just off the back of a few discussions we've been having with different people. It's just getting very confusing. And as a result, when it's not done well already, I think it's meaning that it's done even worse. So that's where I'm getting frustrated. Which I think we'll unpack now. So what it is and what it's not, and hopefully it becomes clearer after this.
So what does real athletic development actually involve?
Well, I guess what it's not and what people are seeing is, I've never been a fan of group fitness classes. Not this group training I'm okay with, and we do group training. I think there's a lot of benefit from being in a group and like-minded people and the environment sort of shaping your program before you've even done an exercise. But fitness classes typically, as a result, is got not even like a coach out the front, but more like an instructor motivator, just yelling and timer and loud music and stuff. And it's not so much about quality; it's just about getting work done. So yes, there's an element of working hard, but like we know in the athletic population, most of their hard work and a lot of the volume and that should be their sport. And again, this is where what we talked about CrossFit before. CrossFit is hard training, no doubt, and a lot of respect for those athletes. But that is their sport. So CrossFit sessions are training for CrossFit. It's like saying I'm going to ditch footy train and just train basketball. So yes, there's some crossover, but basketball's not going to make you a better footballer, for 80% of it. You need to do footy. You need to do all the footy skills and the footy movements and the game plans and tactics. So group fitness classes, even like PTs aren't training athletes. We're going to talk a bit about a framework. Like, it's very basic movements, very basic programming. It's very bodybuilding, weight loss focused. So again, it's not what athletes need for the most part. So I mentioned CrossFit, the HIIT sort of boot camp style stuff, which is some of the other franchises. I just don't see it moving the needle. It's very general. Maybe you can make a case off season sort of stuff, but in season particularly, and just with high end athletes, I just don't think it has a place in athlete performance. I've been lucky to go to a few AFL clubs, higher performance environments, Olympic sort of institutes, Olympic pathway centres, and I can tell you none of the examples I just gave you have ever seen in those buildings. Not to say they haven't done it occasionally, but it's not the mainstay of their training. Yet athletes go there thinking, do more of this and I'll get a certain outcome. Even running programs, like endurance programs, lots of running, isn't going to help in my experience, athletes we've seen, because most of them can't produce the outputs. So just more sub-max work isn't going to raise the ceiling. It might raise their floor a little bit, and that's where it's deceptive. Same with this stuff. Like, get a bit fitter, get a bit stronger. It's raising the floor, but it's not teaching them the qualities they're going to need to get to the next level. And so when they come to us, we essentially still have to start at phase 1, which I know your athlete roadmap has gone down really well, and it gives a great insight to the journey with us. And I think that's what they're seeing. Even if they've done some training outside of what we do, because we start with the basics and build them up with what I think they need to go to get, we kind of know where we want to take them, then it doesn't matter if they've done 10 years of group fitness class, they're still at stage 1 with us because they probably can't do the basic movements well.
No, I think that's the thing there that you sort of touched on with all those different franchises is the negative transfer.
Yep.
Yes, I think we've had these chats all the time around it's great and that it has their purpose for your more gen pop, if you're trying to lose weight, those kind of things, it's great.
Yep.
But for an athlete, it's probably not the best training program, especially when you've got to factor in sport, age, injury history, like all those factors probably aren't factored in, I should say, in those programs because it is a lot of generalised kind of training. So yeah, what are your kind of thoughts around, I guess, how we can sort of improve strength training and what we should be doing ideally?
So I think we definitely want to build the general physical qualities, and we kind of talk about them in buckets, and they don't exist in silos or buckets, but strength, power, speed, coordination and capacity, or load tolerance or endurance, whatever you want to call it. You want to build all those things. You need a really strong, powerful, fast, coordinated athlete that can do a lot of work. But I think the but there is with an emphasis always on movement quality. And we see it all the time, and even some of our kids, we've got to strip them back because they might get through a session or two, they go under the radar a little bit, but then certain movements flag, things that they can't do well. Like for me, the classic is a split squat to the floor. So I could give kids, we could do 200 walking lunges, but if they only go halfway down, are they really putting the mobility demands on the front of their hip that they're going to need to do a ground ball in footy? Or if they get off balance and they got to get low in basketball, or if they slip on a netball court. And then what we see is these little things happen, or smaller things over time, and they get recurrent hip flex issues. But when we say, can you do a body weight split squat with your knee on the ground and stand up? They've got to cheat it. They can't get off the ground. They can't do all these things, and it's simple movements. So a big emphasis for me on the quality. So can they execute key movements and do it well? And then progressing it. So it's not just random workouts where it's hard to know what's the progress. It's a block of training, and then that progresses to the next block. And then end of season. So you might strip it back and build some volume, but then there's another block that leads into another block. So there needs to be some sort of plan that people are following with their programs. And even if it is group fitness or group training, the whole group should be following a plan, not just, today we're going to do this, WOD, and this, today we're going to do this fitness circuit, and then tomorrow it's a completely different one that has no kind of progression or plan. Because I always think, what if a kid shows up every day to our programs? Does it factor in what they did yesterday? How can we make sure they're developing everything they need to develop, but yesterday's not affecting today, and today's not going to affect tomorrow too much. So there needs to be some plan.
That's right. I know we've obviously in talks with potentially hopefully getting a new facility, which means sort of new structure around training, and I think even just catering the program from what it's going to look like Monday to Friday to optimise for sort of game day if, say, we're in season.
Yep.
So it's like kind of, spreading out and looking at the program from a holistic standpoint. So, it might be a bit more kind of speed, heavy lifting earlier in the week, a bit more priming sort of later in the week.
Yep.
And then sort of figuring out, based on people's schedules and sports, what kind of, and their strengths and weaknesses for that matter, what kind of buckets do they need to sort of fill during the week?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And it's hard because most athletes are drawn to what they're good at. And yes, you want to really harness your strengths, but you got to give some attention to your weaknesses and make sure that you're building those at the same time. And this is why this is hard. If it was easy, we'd all be amazing athletes, and none of us, we wouldn't have a job.
That is true.
Bring up our whiteboard.
Yep.
So if you're looking for a framework, so what I've got there is the the sort of younger athlete fundamentals, I think, works well for exactly that. Younger athletes, beginners, more school-based programs. So if you're looking for a way to tick a lot of boxes, then to me, squat, hinge, lunge, landing, bracing, rotation, push and pull, which is your upper body. If you can tick something off in all those most of the time and do it with some good quality, then you're going to develop a pretty well-rounded athlete. I do, and so this is a pretty common strength and conditioning kind of philosophy. These are, we do a lower body push, lower body hinge, upper body push pull, and that's how a lot of programs are written, which I think has a lot of value, and don't get me wrong, it's important. I do think there's a middle ground that's missed in and around some of the, Alex and Tara's isometric stuff, and we've seen a lot of benefit there in and around, low skill can be high intensity, really rapid results, put them in right positions and stuff. So there's a bit of a middle ground, and that's why I really like sort of Tony Holler's, which I've got on the right, bit more of a performance athlete-based model. It sounds simpler, but it gets pretty context, as you know, done a lot of this training, that if you can sprint, jump high, jump far, and be bouncy, then you're going to be pretty athletic. I don't think you can go straight to that if you're not very athletic or don't have all the movement competencies, which is why I think there's two frameworks. And this is why we separate our athletes, sort of that pre-peak height velocity, younger athletes in one group. And then we've got our other two groups where we do a bit more advanced stuff. But yeah, I think the goal for me is a bit more than the outcome. So then how do I reverse engineer sprinting, jumping high, jumping far, and being really bouncy? So things like bouncy, or a lot of ankle strength, a lot of Achilles tendon work goes into that. So it gets a bit more specific, I guess, in that later phase. So again, it's about movement quality. It's about, building the basic physical qualities that go into that and doing it progressively. But I guess the focus shifts to be a bit more field-based as opposed to sort of gym-based movements, even though we might still be training it in the gym, if that makes sense. Because then that links into our sprint mechanics, our deceleration on the field, which athletes do that hundreds of times a game, but most can't forward lunge. Yeah, so get the movement skill right first, build capacity, then we need to be doing it from, and that links to me, jump far. So if you jump far, you've got to obviously land. So can you brake against forward momentum? Like I said, a lot of kids can't do a single leg forward lunge without falling forward, or, my hip, or feel out my quad, because it's a strength or a mobility issue. Then, building things like the tendon specific strength, that stuff, and then increasing power. So a lot goes into it. And I guess for me, why does all that matter? And why do we do what we do? So I think some, misconceptions around the strength training. So if I told you strength was as effective as stretching to improve mobility, would people think of it a little bit different? Like they think bodybuilders, big, tight muscles. But if done well through the correct ranges, like with good technique, then we know it's as effective as increasing your mobility as stretching, because it works through full ranges and builds control in those ranges. Really heavy, slow stuff is probably the best way to build really healthy tendons, which is a bit topical at the moment, given, across a few different sports, we're seeing tendons going left, right and centre. So, sports are really high impact, high speed, which exposes tendons but doesn't necessarily develop them. And that's why sometimes we need to step off the field and do some heavy, slow stuff to help them get nice and strong and healthy. We know strong athletes get injured less, they'll recover faster, and generally perform better, like jump higher and produce more force and stuff. So, builds confidence, especially after injury. We know that strength training combined with endurance training is better than endurance training alone at improving things like your running economy, your time to exhaustion. Basically means you can do more, for longer. So it even helps endurance sports, which is why even, longer, running events and this sort of stuff, swimming, are still investing a lot in their strength training. And I also think that people often, with speed, a higher top end speed increases your speed reserve, which is going to improve your repeat speed performance in games. A good one is if you think of like 100 meters. If someone can run 10 meters per second, so if they can average that, there's a 10-second 100. But if you can only hit 9, well, that other person can run at 90% and run next to you, and then in the last 10 meters, who's going to win? The bloke that's swinging their arms about to fall over, or the bloke that's just been going 9 out of 10 the whole way and still has another gear just to finish off. Having a higher speed will help that as well. So they're all the things I'm constantly thinking about with our programs in and around athletic development, not just strength and not just conditioning. I guess back to the start around that definition. To me, we're strength and conditioning coaches. It's a bit wanky, but I like the term athletic performance coach or athletic development coach because it's more in around, we're trying to make people more athletic. It's not just strength and not just conditioning. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. So,